Hi there guys, and welcome to List Tier List, where I rank every Grand Theft Auto game. I know on this channel I usually cover cartoons and TV shows, but I'm also a video game fan, and Grand Theft Auto is one of my all-time favourite franchises. I know the GTA 6 hype is still a year away, but I can still go back and look at the classics, and rank them all based on my personal opinions. Feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments, by the way, as we go. But I'm going to start off with the original Grand Theft Auto, of course. I've tried to get them in order here, as good as possible. And the original deserves a bit of credit for being the original, so I'm going to put it in C tier, but it's not a great game, realistically. It doesn't hold up to modern standards. I've never fully played it, but I know what the game's all about. I have seen it. It's obviously a top-down game. The graphics and things like that don't hold up. But hey, it not only has the Grand Theft Auto name, it also created a lot of the names of the cities that carried on throughout the entire series, like Liberty City and things like that, so there are elements of this game which stood the test of time, so for that it deserves some credit. But I can't give it any more than C tier. This is the GTA London, which was an expansion of the original. And, well, D tier. Again, I have never played it, but it's an expansion of the original, which wasn't that great by itself, and it doesn't get that extra credit of being the first game, so I kind of have to put it in the bottom tier. GTA 2, likewise. It didn't improve much on GTA 1, and once again didn't get the credit of being the first. GTA 3 is where things get quite a lot more interesting. It was a massive leap forward for both the series and gaming as a whole, so it deserves a lot of credit for that. But as a game, it doesn't hold up that well. I think B tier. I have actually played this game, and it starts out pretty well, I think. The story in the first island is reasonably strong. Claude being the silent protagonist means it is hard to kind of get behind him, of course. He's not the most inspiring character in the world. He's basically just a thug hitman for hire. He has no morals whatsoever. That being said, the intro cutscene is quite iconic, and Catalina is an iconic villain. This game also brought in a lot of well-loved characters that would go on to appear in future 3D games, like Donald Love, Phil Cassidy, etc. So it was an acceptable story that laid the foundations of what was to come, just not great. The gameplay aged even worse though. The game is punishingly hard for no reason at times. The powerful guns some of the enemies have will shred you up in no time, and some of the missions have extremely penalising timers, especially given that you don't have access to a full map. There's lots of little quirks like that in the gameplay, which are just a pain to go back and play, having played the more recent games. Claude can't swim, of course, which is another negative, and there's a ton of features missing, which future games would implement. So again, I can't give this game that much credit. It was definitely a product of its time. A few gameplay things which did hold up was the radio stations it introduced. Those were very funny and had some killer music, which future GTA games would build on, as well as the weapon switching, etc., the wanted level system with the stars. This game definitely brought a lot to the table that future games would build off. So it was a very important game, just not necessarily a good one. Moving on, we have Grand Theft Auto Vice City. This is S tier for me. While objectively, I don't think you can call this the best GTA, it might be my personal favourite, the one which clicks with me the most. Starting with the story here and setting, they nail the vibe of the 80s Miami so well. I, like a lot of people that played this game, wasn't even born during the 80s, but it still somehow made me feel nostalgic for an era I never even got to experience. But from all the clips you see of the 80s, as well as all the 80s music, the vibe this game had is almost unmatched. The licensed soundtrack is probably the best in the series, and there are so many iconic locations, like the Malibu Club, the Vassetti Estate, all the businesses you can buy in the story, which actually links into the story as well. It's all great stuff, and it helps cover the fact that the map is a little small. In terms of the characters, Tommy Vassetti is a legend. He might be my favourite protagonist. I find some of the lines he has very funny, even if he does love the use of the word prick. He's such a badass the way he rises through the ranks of Vice City and ends up basically owning the city by the end. The whole backstory with Sonny Forelli, and how he became known as a Harwood Butcher, and how he takes revenge on Sonny, as well as the backstabbing Lance Vance in the end. The story came together very well in the end, despite not being the deepest in the series. There's a lot of iconic side characters in the game as well. Ken Rosenberg is great, incredibly funny. Some of the early cutscenes in his office are iconic. Some other interesting characters are Auntie Poulet, a very unique character, the way she gets Tommy to do her bidding. Umberto Rubino, a funny character as well. That plays into the whole Cuban-Haitian gang war. That got the game a bit of criticism. Love Fist, of course, and their Psycho Stalker. Those are a memorable set of missions to me. The story to me just matched the setting. It was fairly easy to follow, had a relaxed vibe to it, but also had some standout moments, and was very memorable. The gameplay still had its shortcomings, like the controls can be a bit stiff at times, and Tommy still can't swim, or jump and climb objects for example, but it was still so much better than GTA 3. There were some hard missions here, like Demolition Man for example, and Bombs Away, where you have to control a little RV plane, but even these are more forgiving than GTA 3's missions. There is also a ton more variety here than in GTA 3. Here you have all the asset missions, which involves the first heist ever in the series, where you rob a bank. Missions where you have to drive a boat or fly a plane for the film studios, for example. The taxi missions are quite memorable, where you have to battle this rival firm and take out all their taxis. The early missions where you have to work for Cortez and Diaz. There's a lot of variety in there as well. And the final mission, Keep Your Friends Close, provided enough challenge without being overly brutal. Of course, some side content you had, like the vigilante missions, the taxi missions, the ambulance missions, etc. Those were a welcome addition. They not only added some more content to the game, they also actually helped improve Tommy's stats. So it really gave you a tangible gameplay bonus to completing them. You also have the hidden packages, etc., which, if completed, gives you a wide selection of weapons, like the rocket launcher, the minigun, flamethrower, and all these other weapons which are fun to use. Basically, this game is just a much better version of GTA 3. And once again, the vibe and tone of the game is one of the best ever in gaming history for me. So it has to be top tier. Next up we have San Andreas. And this is GOAT tier. Although I maybe prefer Vice City, I have to say San Andreas is objectively the better game. It's simply a bigger game, more to do, a lot more content. Let's start off with the story first. Instead of the 80s we had a early 90s setting here, and it definitely captured that hood vibe in the early part of the game very well. CJ is another iconic character. He, like Tommy, has a meteoric rise, starting out as a lowly criminal who's getting hunted by corrupt cops, only to end up owning businesses and casinos. He busts his brother out of jail after he was put in there by Tenpenny. He has to learn to fly in order to be able to do it. If you go down that route, he also becomes like a skilled martial artist, a weapons specialist. Like CJ can do it all. His feats in game are absolutely ridiculous. Then you add to it all the side characters like Caesar, the Chad who always has your back. The Truth is a funny character. Torino is a interesting yet scary character. And the antagonists are fantastic. Tenpenny, of course, amazing, voiced by Samuel L. Jackson. Pulowski you just love to hate. He's such a douchebag that it's so satisfying when you kill him. Big Smoke again, an absolute icon. The betrayal is one of the most iconic moments probably in gaming. His order is so funny. Another iconic scene there. Even his final line is iconic. We still remember your name, Big Smoke. The only character that wasn't handled maybe so well was Ryder. He ended up feeling a bit like an afterthought, which for such an important character in the early part of the game felt a little off. It's almost like the writers never really committed to his betrayal, so they killed him off in the middle of San Fierro, in what felt like a bit of a damp squib. The character deserved a lot better. I definitely forgive it overall though, given all the other stuff the story did right. I suppose Sweet can be a bit annoying at times as well, especially towards the end of the game, where after you break him out from prison, he wants to go back to the hood life, instead of appreciating the stuff that CJ did for him, or the empire that he built. But hey, he's caught in that mentality he was brought up with, so I do understand Sweet's mindset, even if I don't agree with it. The ending of this game is very satisfying as well. The way you tie up all the loose ends, CJ's final goodbye to Tenpenny, and everyone being at the Johnson house in the end to kind of celebrate their victory. A feel-good way to end what was a great story. As good as the story was, the gameplay of this game might be even better. It was absolutely groundbreaking for its time. There was so much to do here. Let's start with the obvious. CJ can swim now, even being able to dive underwater. This unlocks so many more mission opportunities, like the missions where you have to get on the ships, for example. There's so many side and mini games you can do. You have all the ones from Vice City, as well as other fun things like a parachute being available, triathlons you can do, so many collectibles. You can even go and place bets on horse racing. You can go and gamble in the casino. You can play pool. You can play basketball. Like, it's fantastic, the amount of stuff you can do here. This is also the most in-depth food system in the series. You have 3 types of restaurants: Clucking Bell, Burger Shot and the Pizza Place, all of which have some funny dialogue with the server. But what you eat actually affects gameplay. It affects CJ's size. The more you eat, the fatter you get, and if you don't eat, you actually lose health and will die eventually. It's a very interesting dynamic. Some people might get annoyed by it, but I think it helped with the realism. And you can always go to a gym and burn off the fat to get CJ muscly if you want. Again, it's your choice. You can play the game how you want to, and have the experience you want to. Same with finding all the hidden girlfriends that are in the game. I haven't even touched on the main story missions here. The mission variety is fantastic in this game. You have a mission in San Fierro where you have to follow a train for Tenpenny back to Los Santos to assassinate someone who has dirt on him. You have a mission where you have to destroy the construction site and bury the foreman in concrete. That's just as dark as it sounds. And in Las Venturas, you have the whole casino heist set up, and the heist itself. Those are a very fun set of missions. The only thing which does drag with the gameplay is that final push before you can complete the game, where you have to take back all the territories for Grove Street. This takes up a bit too much time, and Sweet is often with you and frankly gets in the way. And screw you if you got the territories early in the game, because you lose them all during CJ's absence and have to do them all again. This whole section felt a bit like padding, to be honest, and in my opinion they should have cut back on it. The only other minor gripe I can think of is the flying school missions. Some of those flying missions can be a bit tedious, but it really is a minor gripe compared to all the good things the game has to offer. So in summary, I think this game is the best of the series. Sure, the graphics and that don't hold up, but it was so far ahead of its time. Still so fun to play, without even playing the main story. You could just explore the map and the 3 cities and even the countryside for a long time. Even landmarks which have no story impact, like the big radio tower in a desert and the little tourist geyser, for example. All this stuff adds world building and flavour to the experience. And who could forget Area 51, or Area 69 as it's creatively called. Not only is there a mission about that in the game, where CJ somehow raids the place to get a jetpack, you can go there in free roam and try and survive against the cops and military which patrol the area. Again, yet another fun option that is available in this game. San Andreas is just the best, what can I say? Moving into these stories games now, I don't have as much to say about these. Liberty City Stories is B tier. There are parts of this game I like. Tony Cipriani is a bit of a bland protagonist, but I do like the mafia side of things, with Salvatore Leone. and this game has a very dark feeling to it. Tony Cipriani does some incredibly dark things, like blowing up an entire block, basically a terrorist kind of action. He also kills people for Donald Love to eat. Yes, Donald Love is a cannibal in this game, and he even serves the remains of one of his victims in like a butcher's shop as well. Are you seeing now why I think this is perhaps the darkest game in the entire series? It's certainly up there. However, as I said, a lot of the story falls a bit flat. It certainly wasn't as engaging as I'd have liked. Same with the gameplay. It felt more like going back to Vice City rather than San Andreas. A lot of the features were removed. You again can't swim, and the side activities are nowhere near as good. Again, in Vice City it was more acceptable, but here it felt like a massive step back. Although this game is by no means my favourite, I will give massive props to the theme song. It's probably my favourite theme song in the entire franchise. Not only is the beat so good, it matches the Mafia type vibe perfectly. Moving on to GTA Vice City Stories. I think it's better than Liberty City Stories and GTA 3. Is it good enough for A tier? I think so, just about. Again, the story is nothing special. Vic Vance is a so-so protagonist. He does have some more morality to him, which is a different look, and seeing the interactions between him and Lance certainly give you more insight into how Lance Vance operates, and how incompetent, frankly, he is. It's also cool to see the old Vice City characters back, like Ricardo Diaz, and you even get Phil Collins appearing. In this game, you have a few missions based around him, which is interesting, to say the least. So, a middling to maybe slightly above average story. The gameplay brought back a lot of the features missing from Liberty City Stories. It's not quite as good as San Andreas, but there was a lot more you could do. You had like a golf driving range, among many other things. I actually found this game quite difficult. Not that the missions are badly designed by themselves, but I remember dying so many times in certain missions where enemies just spawn in behind you, it seems, and take you out in no time. That might just be a skill issue on my part though, so I'm not gonna duck the game points for that, but I had to mention it. Overall though, this was an enjoyable experience. Not quite top tier, but still very good. Next up is GTA Advance. And I admit to never playing this game, so it's gonna go here. I'm not saying it's bad, but I've simply never played it. If you have played it, please leave me your thoughts in the comments. Chinatown Wars was obviously originally a handheld game. I've never played it, but I've seen bits of it, and it looks okay, to be honest. Probably mid-tier. It got decent reviews, and the people who I've spoken to who have played it think it's decent. The main character is not that memorable when you compare him to some of the others, but based on what I've seen and heard, the game had enough about it to make it stand out, and to make it a enjoyable enough experience. Moving on to the big modern boys now. GTA 4 is probably top tier. I definitely love the game, but it doesn't quite pass these two for me. Let me explain. Starting with the story. This is probably the best story ever told in the franchise. It's obviously very dark and gritty, with Nico being sold the American dream by Roman, his cousin, only to get to the US and have everything go to hell basically. You also have Nico's past hanging over him all the time, where he tries to be a good person but is also secretly on this revenge mission for the guy that killed his squad back in the day. The whole game is basically a struggle, where Nico keeps getting pulled into the dark world, while dealing with his own inner demons the entire way. And there is no good ending here, by the way. Whichever ending you choose, deal or revenge, Nico suffers a loss because of it. Now one is a lot more impactful than the other, where, spoiler alert, Roman gets killed. That definitely hits hard. But basically whatever choices you make in the game, Nico still goes through a lot of pain. Even in the side missions here, the dark tone comes through. You have creepy characters like Eddie Lowe, for example, the serial killer, and the whole Diamond subplot, which runs parallel to The Lost and the Damned, and the Ballad of Gay Tony expansions. And of course you have the antagonists. People like Jimmy Pellegrino are just assholes, but Dmitry Rascalov, a very appropriate name there, is just a pure scumbag. A very stupid scumbag as well. It's like he's addicted to betraying people. He wheels you in, gets you to kill Faustin, only to stab you in the back and try and get Nico killed. The reason he's stupid is that it would be much more prudent to get Nico as an ally, given how much of a badass and how productive Nico can be. But instead he picks a fight with Nico, which of course he ends up losing. It's so satisfying to finally kill Dimitri, and that's when you know you've got a good antagonist. The friend system you have can get a bit annoying at times, with the infamous, "Hey cousin, let's go bowling," those phone calls that Roman keeps giving you, but the fact that a system like that is there at all is interesting. The hangouts themselves aren't great, but all of the characters are interesting. The whole Dwayne and Playboy X dynamic. Brucey is a very fun, eccentric one. Little Jacob is a legend, even if it's hard to understand him at times. And Roman is one of the best characters of the series. So funny. And he is a good person deep down, I think. He's just a flawed human being. He gets caught up in all his addictions, and is frankly a bit of a coward in the face of all the rough people he has to deal with. Thankfully, he does care about Nico, and they do help each other get by in the end. Especially after Roman's business grows, and he gets better taxis, which Nico can use for free. So yeah, story-wise, this was very good. Interesting characters, a very dark tone which they committed to. You actually care about what happens to Nico and his family, and you have a set of villains who you want to defeat. You can't really ask for much more. Now, as you might have guessed, given how much I've praised the story, it was the gameplay which stopped this being right at the top of this list. It's by no means bad, but I did find it lacking in a lot of key areas. Let's start with the most glaring example to me, the mission variety. Most of the missions in this game revolve around you going to shoot a bunch of people. It's Nico picks up a mission from some guy. He has to drive to some house or some warehouse or some drug meetup and basically go through a corridor of killing and shooting lots of people. Now this is a bread and butter of a lot of GTA missions, I understand that. But with this game it's like 80% of all missions, and it gets very samey, and even the missions which aren't done in this way don't have that much variety to them. They don't stand out as being that fun. Like you have a mission where you go and get on the internet, for example, which hardly involves any gameplay. You have some chase missions which are very scripted, on rails. The one that comes to mind is when you have to chase the guy on the bike through the town. It's very drawn out, and there's like scripted roadblocks to be in your way. It's not particularly fun, and that sums up a lot of the missions gameplay wise for me. There's also the issue of customization. This game cut back so much. You can't get haircuts anymore, you're more limited on the choices of outfits. There's not as many side activities for you to do. You don't even have fun things like a jetpack or a parachute or even a military base. You can't even fly planes in this game, so it does take away something from the gameplay experience for me. I understand it was maybe done on purpose to kind of match the gameplay with the more gritty tone of the story, but it's still simply not as fun to play for me as San Andreas, or probably even Vice City to be honest. So for that reason it slides below them in the rankings. Now in fairness, there are a few things about the gameplay which I liked. The ragdoll physics were a bit over the top at times, but they were still somewhat realistic and fun to play around with. The way of driving cars was much more realistic, which I'm fine with. I wouldn't say I prefer it, I like both ways to be honest. I like both the arcadey way and the more realistic way. This game also certainly had quite a lot of attention to detail, so it deserves some extra credit for that. Basically, I sum this game up as like a 9 out of 10 story-wise, and maybe a 7 out of 10 gameplay-wise. So it's still a great game overall. I can understand why some people have this as their best, but as a full package for me, it's not quite the funnest to play. Moving on now, we have the 2 DLCs of GTA 4. I do quite like how all these 3 link together, by the way, story-wise. Let's start with The Lost and the Damned. This is C tier for me. Most people probably disagree, they probably have this a bit higher, but I didn't really enjoy playing this game. Gameplay wise, it's still the same dull and dreary experience as the vanilla GTA 4, so not much of an improvement there. You still have a lack of options really. And the story was okay at best. I guess delving into Lelour's to biker gang's backstory more had some interesting moments, but none of the characters stood out to me that much, and everything is kind of centered around a secondary Diamonds subplot with Ray Boccino. The protagonist, Johnny, he's like very low tier in the criminal underworld. He's always taking orders from other people and frankly getting pushed around a lot. And he supposedly beats his drug addiction or whatever in the end, but we know how that ends in GTA 5. So that kind of sours the whole thing even more. I don't know, I never got into this expansion very much. It's just a much worse version of GTA 4. It carried all of the same problems, only never had the upside either. Now The Ballad of Gay Tony on the other hand, was the exact opposite. It's A tier for me, similar to Vice City Stories actually. It brought a lot of colour and a lot more options to the table gameplay wise. This game actually added like a, not exactly an army tank, but a SWAT tank version of it. It brought in a parachute, and lots of other fun things you can do gameplay wise, like the golf range, etc. The mission variety also seemed a bit better because of those changes. Even the story was better than Lost and the Damned. Luis was okay, but Gay Tony himself was interesting. How he keeps getting himself into trouble, and Luis has to keep bailing him out of it essentially. But he also had fun side characters, like Yusuf, the son of like a rich Arab billionaire, who owns this big penthouse in the middle of Liberty City. Some of his antics are just hilarious. Arab money indeed. This was just a fun expansion. It's not that long a game of course, so I can put it at the very top, but it's one of the more fun GTA experiences for my money. Finally we have the mammoth that is GTA 5. This has to go top tier for me. It's not as good as San Andreas in my opinion. I don't prefer it over Vice City. Overall, I think it gives above 4. I really do. Now, it seems to be the kind of trendy opinion nowadays to call everyone who rates GTA 5 like some kind of GTA casual, but I'm not into that kind of gatekeeping. GTA 5 is a great game, there's no doubt about that. Story-wise, it's good. It's not as good as 4 or San Andreas, maybe not even Vice City in my opinion, in terms of how iconic it is. But it's still very competently told. The 3 main protagonists are decent. I wish Franklin had a bit more about him. The whole Tanisha dynamic, especially at the end, fell a bit flat for me. They apparently even got back together in GTA Online. But hey, online is a whole nother can of worms, which I'm not going to talk about here. I played it a bit when it first came out, but obviously it got very monetized over the years. And it's at the core of a lot of problems with not just GTA, but the gaming industry as a whole, in my humble opinion. So GTA 5 gets no credit from me for the online section, even though I'm sure some people have fun with it. Back to the story. As I was saying, Franklin was okay but not great. Michael was an interesting character. He likes to present himself as this intelligent guy who does actually have some morals deep down, but he is totally like a sociopath. Incredibly selfish. Even on a personal level, obviously, the way he portrays Trevor, which, frankly, is the main running story throughout the entire game. And Trevor is, I guess, an iconic character. Absolutely crazy, has some iconic moments, and is a fun character to not only watch in cutscenes, with some of the stuff and rants he comes out with, but he is also fun to play as, letting like his special ability run wild in fights. Now the side characters, and especially the villains of this game, were slightly disappointing. Michael's family are mostly annoying. Ron, Trevor's sidekick, is kind of lackluster. Lamar is decent, I guess, probably the best of them. He has some surprising chemistry with Trevor, believe it or not, as well as Franklin. Back to the villains though, we have Steve Haynes and Devin Weston. They are both evil and you do like to hate them. You can't say they're as good as like Dimitri or Big Smoke or Tenpenny. You just can't do that. And the ending, in my opinion, forgetting about the 2 other endings, I'm talking about the canon ending here, it was a bit rushed. Like you spent the entire game fearing these guys, but then you just go and take them all out all at once, and it was essentially the easiest thing in the world. It makes sense that you can take them out, don't get me wrong, but the ending still felt a bit underwhelming. Still, the fundamentals of the story are done very well. All the voice actors do a great job. Some of the missions are great. Bury the Hatchet stands out, where Michael and Trevor have their big standoff in North Yankton. The game's tone is a bit lighter than GTA 4's, on the surface at least, but if you get into the depths of it, there is some satire there about Los Santos obviously being a parody of Los Angeles, and all the kind of fakeness on the surface when underneath there's an underbelly, an undercurrent of just depression being masked by this fake Hollywood lifestyle. So there are dark elements to GTA 5 of course, the torture scene is infamous. I don't have a problem with it myself because it was clearly put in there to show the negatives of torture and how it's not particularly effective. But yeah, there is a lot of dark stuff and a lot of violence in this game of course. Story-wise, I give this game probably an 8 out of 10, something like that. It's good. Not a masterpiece, but very good. Gameplay-wise, this is probably second to San Andreas as the best, in my opinion. There's so much to do here. So many side activities, like tennis, that's a great side activity. The golf minigame, that's almost like an entire game by itself. It's not far off what you get from like a official PGA Tour game. It's so in depth. There's too many side activities and fetch quests and things like that for me to name. Strangers and Freaks is another good set of side missions. Even some fun characters come from that. The old British couple, or not a couple apparently, Nigel and Mrs. Thornhill, are my favourites. The customization is also great of course. You can customize any vehicle how you want pretty much. The clothing options and hairstyles, so many options for your characters. The one thing it is missing, I guess, is the ability to go in restaurants, and maybe the lack of interiors is a bit disappointing overall. So it does get a bit of a knock for that, but not too much of a knock because overall it is fantastic. There's even like an in-game stock market for God's sake, which links into Franklin's assassination missions. The actual core story missions, again, is what I go on about a lot. Mission variety. This rivals San Andreas for the mission variety. You obviously have the heists, which are like the central points in the game. The planning of them where you have to choose your crew members. It's not that in depth, but it does add something, especially when you find crew members on the world map while just exploring free roam, like the car driver for example, who works for like 4% of the take, and you can even find Patrick McCreary, from GTA 4 of course. The heists themselves are mostly fun. You have a couple of different options, which adds to the replayability value a bit. But even outside of the heists, the first section of the game has you just stealing cars with Franklin, then you move up to working with Michael, then Trevor gets into the mix and you have to do some kind of working for the FIB, which involves helicopters, breaking into like a government building. Then you have the bit in the desert after that. That involves flying missions. There's one mission where you have to literally jump onto a moving train with a bike. Another one where you have to kind of hunt around the forest with a sniper to find these hillbillies Trevor is wanting dead. There's just a lot going on, and it is very fun to play. I guess I should mention this game also introduced a different way of changing weapons. It had the kind of weapon wheel, which slows down time when you're changing weapons. That's common with a lot of modern games, and I think it was implemented well here. Again, the actual weapons themselves, there's a lot of variety to them, and you unlock more weapons as you go through the game. So yeah, overall, I don't have a personal attachment to this game, which I do for like San Andreas or Vice City, but it's still very fun to play, and there's a lot of content to do, especially if you're going like full completionist. It's a great game overall, even if it did mean that we have to wait 11 years for GTA 6. Let's hope when that game finally comes out, it also manages to crack the top tier. That's it for this video guys. Just a bit of a fun one where I went through my very off the top of my head thoughts on the GTA franchise. Leave me your thoughts in the comments, and I'll catch you next time. Take care.